wedding was supposed to be perfect. The music, the flowers, the vows, everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. But in one moment, everything stopped. A 14-year-old boy stood at the center aisle, his hands shaking as he held up a phone. The bride's smile vanished. The groom, his own father, stared in disbelief, frozen. Guests whispered, confusion spreading like wildfire through the room. Then, with a trembling voice, the boy said 4 words that silenced everyone. "Dad, please, look at this." What he revealed next, it wasn't just a message, it was proof. Proof that the woman his father was about to marry had been hiding something that would tear their family apart. In that instant, joy turned into heartbreak, and love turned into betrayal. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. David had done everything right, worked hard, raised his son alone, and tried to move on. 6 years had passed since the accident that took his wife, and though the ache never left, he'd built a life that made sense again. His small repair shop sat at the corner of a quiet street where neighbors waved every morning, where people still left their doors unlocked, and where everyone knew each other's names. Ethan, his 14-year-old son, was quiet, observant. He'd learned to read people early, maybe because he'd watched his father carry grief in silence for so long. When Clara entered their lives, it felt like a new beginning. She was everything David thought he'd lost. Kind, gentle, patient. She listened when he spoke, laughed at his dry jokes, and seemed to understand his pain better than anyone else ever could. But for Ethan, something about her felt off. She was too perfect, too careful. Her stories never quite matched. And when she looked at him, it wasn't warmth he felt. It was calculation. There were moments when Ethan would catch her watching his father's phone, memorizing passwords, or subtly asking about his business accounts. When he told his dad, David brushed it off. "She's just trying to be part of the family, son," he'd say with a smile that tried to hide exhaustion. But deep down, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Clara wasn't who she said she was, and soon he'd be proven right. Because there was something about Clara that just didn't add up. And Ethan was the only one who noticed. At first, Ethan tried to ignore it. The small things, the strange details that never quite lined up. Clara said she'd grown up in Fairview, just a few towns over. Yet when David mentioned a popular diner there, she hesitated, searching for the name as if she'd never heard of it. Another time, she said her father had worked construction, but weeks later, she spoke of him as a teacher. To everyone else, they were harmless slips. But to Ethan, they were cracks, tiny glimpses of something she was trying to cover. Late at night, he began to notice the soft glow of her phone through the hallway. He'd hear her voice, low and urgent, whispering to someone on the other end. When footsteps approached, she'd end the call, pretending to scroll through social media. She never joined in when his father spoke about his late mom, changing the topic, faking a sympathetic smile, acting as though the memory of her made her uncomfortable. But Ethan knew she wasn't uncomfortable. She was avoiding something. One night around 6:30, as the house fell silent, Ethan passed by her room. The door was cracked open just enough for him to hear her whisper, "Don't worry, it's almost done." She paused, then softly said his father's name. Ethan froze. Almost done? What was she talking about? He backed away slowly, heart pounding, afraid she'd catch him listening. Over the next few weeks, Clara began changing things, little by little. She told David that Ethan needed boundaries, that he was becoming disrespectful, that he didn't appreciate all the love their family was trying to rebuild. She started planning dinners without inviting Ethan, convincing David to take short trips without his son, saying it would be good for them to focus on each other. And David, tired and eager to please, started believing her. The laughter that once filled their home was replaced with tension, unspoken words hanging in the air. Ethan wasn't just losing his father. He was being pushed out of his own home. It wasn't just manipulation. It was control, carefully disguised as care. Ethan could see it, feel it, but he didn't have proof. Not yet. He began to wonder who Clara really was and why she was so desperate to erase the life they'd built before she arrived. So one night, when he couldn't sleep, he made a decision to find out what she was hiding. But when Ethan decided to dig into her past, he had no idea how deep the deception went. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Clara was hiding something, and when no one believed him, he decided to find the truth himself. One afternoon, while his father was at work, he told his best friend Mia, the only person who still listened without judgment. Together, they sat in her room, the glow of the laptop casting shadows across their faces. Ethan typed in Clara's full name, the one she used on every form, every social media account she'd supposedly deleted for privacy. But nothing came up. No old photos, no work history, no trace of her anywhere before the last year. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere. Mia frowned. "That's impossible," she said softly. "Everyone leaves a trail." Ethan leaned closer, scrolling through page after page of empty results, his stomach tightening with every click. The next evening, while Clara was in the shower, Ethan noticed her handbag left open on the kitchen counter. His curiosity got the better of him. Inside, he found an envelope tucked beneath her makeup pouch, thick, sealed, and marked with his father's name. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were printed bank statements, photos of their house, and copies of his father's property deeds. Everything tied to the business, everything that mattered most to David. And then, at the bottom of the stack, a single photograph. Clara, standing beside another man. She was smiling, her arm wrapped around him, wearing the same ring she wore now, the same ring his father had bought her months earlier. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't just lying, she was living two lives. He ran to his aunt's house that weekend, desperate for someone to believe him. "Aunt Lisa, please," he said, showing her the photo on his phone. "She's not who she says she is." But his aunt sighed, setting her coffee cup down. "Ethan, honey, I know losing your mom was hard. Maybe you're just not ready for your dad to move on." The words hit him like a punch. Not ready to move on? He wanted to scream, but instead he just nodded, holding back tears. Back home, things only got worse. Clara told David that Ethan was acting out, that he was struggling with his emotions, that he was jealous of seeing his father happy again, and David, blinded by love, believed every word. Ethan felt invisible, trapped in his own house, his father slipping further away with every lie Clara whispered. But he wasn't giving up. Late one night, he set up an old phone camera in the living room, hidden behind the bookshelf, pointed toward Clara's desk. He didn't know what he'd find, only that he needed proof. Hours later, while the house slept, he heard faint footsteps and the sound of a drawer opening. Through the narrow crack of his bedroom door, he could see her silhouette in the glow of her laptop screen, typing quickly, nervously, whispering into her phone again. And that night, Ethan would catch something on camera that no one could deny. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. His mind kept replaying the same images, Clara's ring, the photograph, the lies. So, before heading to bed, he took the old phone he'd hidden earlier and repositioned it, this time aiming it directly at the living room, the place where Clara spent most of her late nights. He pressed record and quietly went upstairs, pretending everything was normal. Hours passed. The house grew silent. Then, just after midnight, a door creaked open downstairs. Clara's voice broke the silence, low, hurried, uneasy. Ethan's camera caught her leading someone into the living room. It was the man from the photo. They stood close, whispering, their words sharp, almost panicked. "You said it'd be done by now," the man hissed. Clara's reply was cold, steady. "I told you, once the papers are signed, we're gone. He's trusting but not stupid. Just a few more days." The man glanced toward the staircase, tension in his voice. "You think the kid suspects?" Clara's smirk was faint. "He's just a boy. No one believes him." The next morning, Ethan locked himself in his room, his hands shaking as he watched the footage. Every doubt he'd had, every sleepless night, finally made sense. She wasn't marrying his dad for love. She was marrying him for everything he owned. The shop, the house, the savings, all of it. His chest tightened as realization sank in. The woman who had smiled at their dinner table, who had called him sweetheart, who pretended to care, was planning to destroy everything his father had built. If you've watched this far, drop "I'm still here" in the comments. Let's see who's really following this story. Ethan's first instinct was to run downstairs and show his father, but before he could, he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly hid the phone under his mattress, forcing a calm expression as Clara opened his door. She smiled, too sweetly. "You sleep okay?" she asked. Ethan nodded, trying not to flinch under her stare. Then she looked past him, to the shelf where the first camera had been. Her expression changed. "Funny," she said softly, almost to herself. "I don't remember leaving that there." And in that moment, Ethan realized she'd found it. The moment Clara found the camera, everything changed. The next morning, she was in tears, shaking, clutching the small device in her hand as David stood beside her, confusion turning to anger. "He's been spying on me," she said between sobs, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. Ethan tried to explain, tried to tell his father what he'd seen, but Clara interrupted, accusing him of being obsessed, of invading her privacy, of being unstable. David's voice, usually calm, cracked with frustration. "Ethan, this has gone too far," he shouted. "You owe Clara an apology." The boy's words caught in his throat. No matter what he said, Clara twisted it, turning every truth into a lie. She flipped the truth so effortlessly, like she'd done it before. That night, Ethan sat in his room, grounded, phone confiscated, feeling the walls close in around him. Downstairs he could hear laughter, forced, hollow laughter, as Clara comforted his father, playing the role of the victim flawlessly. A few days later, Clara convinced David to move up the wedding date. "Before more drama happens," she said softly, "we just need peace." David agreed without hesitation. Ethan's heart sank. Time was running out. One evening, while his father and Clara were at the florist, Ethan slipped outside, his pulse racing. He opened Clara's car with the spare key she didn't know he had. Inside the glove box, he found a small leather pouch. Inside were documents, a driver's license and a passport, both with Clara's photo, but under a completely different name. His hands shook as he flipped through them. And then, hidden beneath the passport, were 2 printed wedding photos. Clara, with 2 different men, both smiling beside her, wearing the same ring. Ethan's breath caught. He rushed back to his room and searched the names online. One of the men's names led to a discussion forum, an old post written by his sister years ago pleading for information about her brother who had gone missing shortly after his marriage. Ethan hesitated, then messaged her. Hours later she replied, "If she's using that name again, run. My brother signed over his property and 3 days later he disappeared. The police never found her." Ethan's stomach turned cold. Now, it wasn't just a wedding, it was a setup. And if he didn't act fast, his father could be her next victim. The morning of the wedding was calm, almost too calm. The sun cut through the stained glass windows, painting the church pews in soft colors. Guests whispered quietly, smiling, unaware of what was about to unfold. Clara looked radiant, every detail of her appearance perfectly curated. The dress, the hair, the same ring glinting under the light. David stood at the altar, his face glowing with nervous joy, and Ethan sat near the back, silent, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wasn't nervous, he was ready. He'd spent the night before transferring every piece of evidence, the videos, the photos, the messages, onto his phone. All he needed was the right moment. The organ music faded as the officiant began to speak. "Do you, David, take Clara—" "Stop!" Ethan's voice echoed through the hall. The room froze. Gasps filled the air. In that instant, every eye in the room turned. But Ethan didn't hesitate. He walked down the aisle, his heart pounding, and held up his phone. "Before you say anything," he said, his voice trembling but steady, "you need to see this." He plugged the phone into the projector cable meant for the wedding slideshow. The screen behind them flickered, and then came the video. Clara's voice filled the church, whispering to the man from the photo, "Once the papers are signed, we're gone." For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Clara's expression collapsed into panic. "Turn it off!" she shouted, lunging toward Ethan. Guests screamed, some stepping back, others shouting for help. David's face drained of color, his body frozen as the truth played out in front of him. Clara tried to grab the phone, but David stepped between them, his voice breaking. "Who are you?" he demanded. She said nothing, only turned toward the doors. But before she could run, sirens wailed outside. David had already called 911 the moment he saw the video. Officers rushed in within minutes, moving through the stunned crowd. One of them stepped forward, reading from a paper. "Clara Reynolds, or should I say, Lydia Hartman, you're under arrest for fraud and identity theft. You're wanted in 2 states. The music that once filled the church was gone, replaced by heavy silence. The last sound was the metallic click of handcuffs, echoing through the hall as the woman everyone thought was perfect was led away, leaving behind a room full of disbelief and a father staring at the son who had just saved his life. Clara's heels clicked against the church floor as officers led her away, her perfect smile gone, replaced by the cold silence of defeat. Guests whispered, stunned, watching the woman they'd all believed in vanish through the doors in handcuffs. David stood frozen at the altar, his bouquet trembling in his hand, eyes empty. For the first time in years, he had no words. Then, slowly, Ethan approached him. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I tried to tell you, Dad." The boy's composure broke, tears spilling as all the fear, anger, and loneliness he'd held inside came pouring out. David dropped to his knees, pulling his son into his arms, holding him tight. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have listened." For a long moment, neither of them moved. It wasn't just about catching a criminal. It was about a father finally seeing his son, really seeing him. In the weeks that followed, the house was quiet again, but in a peaceful way this time. The shop reopened, neighbors stopped by with warm food and kind words, and David began to rebuild, not his business, but the trust he had nearly lost. One cool morning, he and Ethan stood side by side at the small cemetery on the edge of town, a bouquet of white lilies resting on the headstone. The wind rustled softly through the trees. "Mom would have been proud of you," David said quietly, his hand resting on Ethan's shoulder. The boy smiled faintly, staring at his mother's name carved in stone, feeling for the first time like she was watching them both. Proud, peaceful, and finally at rest. Sometimes the truth hides behind the people we trust most, but it always finds its way out, through courage, love, and the refusal to stay silent. And in the end, it wasn't just the truth that set them free. It was the strength to stand for it, even when no one else would. What do you think? Should Ethan have told his dad sooner? Have you ever had to expose a truth no one believed? Tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story hit you like it did us, hit that like button. It truly helps us reach more people who love real, powerful stories like this one. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more gripping stories every day. Stories that remind us how fragile trust can be and how strong love must become to survive it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and never be afraid to stand for the truth, based on true events.